After looking up who the reclusions were, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to not only make some battle damage Stormcast, but to make them look like they're on their last reforging. These guys are like the hidden gem of this box, because I had no idea that they were coming to the reforging end, and I'm mildly interested in the Stormcast Eternals, so it was a real surprise that there are Stormcast available like this. I say I'm mildly interested in the Stormcast, but between the starter boxes and the AOS magazines, I've built up an army that's easily a couple of thousand points in size. I've done damaging before with my Space Marines, so I'm familiar with doing it, and the first thing I did was to start chipping away on the shield and armour. The shield was pretty much straightforward. I started taking chunks off the edge, and I also add some cuts along to roughen them up a bit. I started adding slice marks to the face of the shield, and then I moved the hobby blade side to side to make the cuts even more wider. I do the same across different parts of the armour, with chip damage and cut marks on the legs, shoulder pads, and I add cut marks across the eye of the helmet, which is a clear inspiration from Mortal Kombat's Sub-Zero. I add some small drill holes across the models for more damage. I was trying to figure out how to roughen up their robes a bit without taking chunks out of them, so I decided to add cut marks along the edges while taking a few small parts out along the way. I also go back to the drill and I add some more damage holes. After priming them with Halford's Great Primer, I think the damage is looking good. They're not overly damaged, but they're definitely showing signs of wear and tear. For the base colours, it's going to be straightforward, because these are the same colours I've used on the Liberators and the Lord Terminus previously, and these are part of the Coastal Knights army from the city of Fair Farig that I created. I start by giving them a spray of Wraithbone for their white armour. This spray makes it really handy for white armour like this, but the only thing is that the Wraithbone paint, or at least the one I have, doesn't quite match the colour of the spray perfectly. So for any cover ups later on, I mix a small bit of white scar into the Wraithbone to match the colour. I paint the shield parts, the armour and decorative parts across the model with Caldor Sky. With all my paints, I add a tiny bit of Laminin Medium into the mix, and I usually do 2 thin layers to get a solid coat on. With the previous models, I used Leadbelcher on all the metal parts, and I did that with these on their weapons blade, decorative parts of the shield and the chainmail. But I got a feeling that since these guys have been around for so long, I think they deserve a little bit more than just some silver. So I switched to Retributor armour, and I started using it on the shield trim, the trim on the armour plates, and the part just behind their head, as well as some trinkets spread out across. They've been battling for a long time, so they deserved a little bit of bling. I went with Screaming Skull to paint the parchment parts. I noticed that it's very similar to the armour colour, but I think I can make it stand out a bit more when it comes to shading. The final thing to do then was to pick a colour for the cloak, and I usually go with a blue for this, but since I wanted these guys to stand out a bit more, I decided to go with Baneblade Brown this time. I think it'll give it a more grounded, rough and dirty look. I've painted 11 of these guys from the Skaventide box so far, so by now I'm getting familiar with the shading of the white, but this time I wanted a dirty old looking white armour, and that's something that I'm not really too familiar with. So after looking through my paints, I decided to take a chance with Basilicanum Grey. I'm hoping that this will give him a dirty look all over, because I could just pick out the damaged parts and just paint them, but I don't think it'll make the rest of the armour look dirty. I had just thought about going with the rust effect, but since it's like a magic armour, I don't think they would really rust up. For the silver and blue parts, I use Null and Oil to shade them all in, and I give them a generous shade with this, but being careful not to let them pool up. And I really wanted the blue to be a lot darker this time, so Null and Oil will do just that. The cape shading was an easy choice to go with Skeleton Horde. This contrast paint was perfect for going over the Baneblade Brown base colour. It's like a lighter Agrax Earthshade is spread around properly, and I really like it. For gold, I usually go with Reikland Flesh Shade, because it lets it have that gold shine come through, but we don't want that this time, so instead I went with the ever reliant Agrax Earthshade and shaded the shoulder pads, shield trim and a few other parts of the gold. I did have some white robes around the legs, so I decided to keep them a little bit cleaner. It would be nice to keep some of the white coming through, so I just shaded them with Apothecary White. Highlights are going to be done a little bit more differently from how I normally do it. I'm wanting the opposite of neat and tidy, so I'm going to dry brush the highlights on, and I start on the white with a dry brush of Pallid Witch Flesh. The only thing with this is, I have to be really careful as to not get on any other non-white parts. It's kind of a neat dry brush. I said earlier that I did want the blue to be darker, but I did go with a bright highlight of Calgar blue on the edges, and it's going to help the blue pop out a lot more instead of getting lost in the dark too much. Both silver and gold are going to be brought back up with Stormcast silver. A silver dry brush highlight over metallic colours really gives them that little extra that makes them stand out more. To give the cape a well used and worn look, I used a dry brush paint Tyrant Skull across it, and with the small cuts I added in along the edges, it was turning out really nice. With most of the models finished, there was still some work to do on the damage marks I added in. I didn't want to just have blood coming out or anything like that. I wanted it to look like the armour's magical energy is coming out. On two of them, I tried starting out with a lighter blue, then adding shade and some white as a highlight on them, but it really didn't work out. So on the final guy, I changed it up and I started with a diluted white scar in the recesses. I then made a glaze with Temple Guard blue, which is made up roughly of 90% lamine medium and 10% Temple Guard blue. I added 3 thin layers of this and spread it out across the area, and this worked out to be a lot better. There was one guy without a helmet, so with the wraith bone as the base coat, I used Guilliman flesh to cover up the whole head for this, and for his moustache and hair, I used Mechanica Standard Grey and then went over it with Basilicanum Grey. I was just about to call him finished, but I kept thinking about the blue battle damage and like it was missing something. I went through my paints and I pulled out a pot of gloss varnish and thought this could be the finishing touch they needed. I found it very hard to actually see the gloss varnish going on, so I only added small amounts on it at a time, and it's really easy to overdo it with the gloss varnish, so small bits is the best way to do it. The reclusions are now ready to help defend the shores of Fairfari. With them being on their last reforging, I wanted these guys to really look like they've been through the wars, and I think I was able to pull it off. And I like how they're going to be standing out from the rest of the cleanly painted army and have the look of the veterans that they're supposed to be. But there are still more coastal knights to be painted and added into the army, and that includes the prosecutors with those amazing flame wings. But if you guys like this video, make sure to let me know in the comment section below, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't, and once again, thanks for watching.